On this edition of Native Report, discover the stunning Petroglyph National Monument in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then hear more about the operations of the Office of Special Trustee for American Indians, and learn about the positive impact of the Native Women's Caucus. We also learn something new about Indian country and hear from our elders on this Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and the Blandin Foundation.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Stacy Thunder. Thousands of images etched into volcanic rock can be found throughout Petroglyph National Monument. Minutes from downtown Albuquerque, these images are inseparable from the cultural landscape, the people who created them, and the people who still revere their significance.
A light breeze blew over the high desert landscape of Petroglyph National Monument as Lori Wiaki made her way toward a very special place.
It's recognized by many tribes from throughout the region, actually even including in Mexico and over towards Hawaii. A lot of indigenous communities, indigenous religious leaders have identified this area as a spiritual, sacred place of prayer, I guess. And I think it's important for folks to understand that all these different communities, religious leaders, utilize this area in a variety of ways. So it's not just one certain thing. Like, you'll see a lot of the petroglyph markings here, but not every tribe would utilize this area specifically to leave behind those petroglyphs. Of course, some do. Some record their visions, their prayers, their clans, their communities said that they need to leave here. On the top of the escarpment here, there's 5 different volcanoes, and when those volcanoes erupted, it left behind this 17-mile long escarpment, and the 17-mile kind of zigzags. It includes canyons and different areas, but the escarpment is where you'll find all these petroglyph markings.
The petroglyphs number in the tens of thousands along the 17 miles of the ancient lava flow.
One time we were showing one of the Hopi elders and kind of explaining, like, politically what was going on with this area, and he showed us this one petroglyph, and it was he says, they call this one the lizard man. He says, but that's not a lizard man. He says it's a man that has big hands and he's got big feet. And he says, and he has the big hands because it shows how hard it is to really make a living out of this land, this arid, kind of fragile land, right? He said, and he's got big feet because it shows how hard it is to stay. And he says, but this is something, this is our home, this is where we're from, and we have learned, you know, and we're forgetting a lot of those lessons, and we need to remember, you know, what it is to know our own homelands the way we used to.
The land where the petroglyphs are located is not tribal land. At one time, jurisdiction was divided between Albuquerque, the state of New Mexico, and the National Park Service. It
was originally jointly managed, and so there was a piece owned by the state of New Mexico, a piece by the city of Albuquerque, and then the National Park Service. And so on one hand, we really advocated and fought that this area should have the strongest federal protections, because we felt like that was the most stable protection and offered the most protection for this area. However, that's not quite politically how things worked out. And as a result, you're still continuing to see an immense amount of growth, pushing on the boundaries of this area. And we were lucky to have one of the elders from one of the pueblos really talk to us about the spiritual integrity of this area. And at the time, he was very concerned about they wanted to build 2 major freeways through this area. And so as young organizers, young Native folks, we were real kind of staunch about the fact that they should not desecrate a sacred site, because that there were alternatives to go around this area.
Urban encroachment was reason enough to lobby for national monument status for the site.
My brother reminds me that it wasn't easy to come out here and leave your prayers and to make these markings. You know, 800 years ago, you were pretty much on foot. You know, you really had to make a long journey to get here, whether if you're from Zuni Pueblo or one of the surrounding pueblos. You couldn't just pick up and be here in 45 minutes or something. And the hard part is, of course, with the urban encroachment, a lot of the tribes have quietly started to not be able to use this place as they have in the past, because it's just part of how it is right now. But you have joggers, you have airplanes, you have schools, all this kinds of stuff. And on one hand, early on in the efforts to protect this area, the tribal leaders, the 19 pueblos, the Navajo Nation, they did discuss the fact that this area was located within the boundaries of the city of Albuquerque. And, through their discussions, they decided it was important to protect this area. There was some really good folks that were really concerned, preservationist, conservation type folks, environmental groups, the Park Service, the tribes. They really got together and said, yes, let's go ahead and create this Petroglyph National Monument.
There is still an enormous amount of growth. Albuquerque is one of the fastest growing cities in the country, making the protection of this resource vitally important.
It's very precious if you really start to look at this site and understand that there's not this sort of collection, every 5 miles, every 10 miles, and that a lot of these petroglyphs have relationships. A lot of these sites have relationships with other sites, whether that's 20 miles away or 100 miles away, or even we've heard they've had relationships to some of the petroglyph collection areas down in Mexico. And on one hand, we're just little people, we're human beings. The areas will take care of themselves, but in the meantime, it almost is like a mirror of what you're doing to yourself. So the more you desecrate these precious areas, you're desecrating yourself, your own generations, and it's like water. If you don't take care of it, if you desecrate the water, it becomes unhealthy and undrinkable, and yet that's what we need to sustain ourselves. It really goes back to what those elders told us, to recognize the spiritual integrity of this area, and to know that this area, like all these sacred places, they know each other, they connect with one another, and they all have different powers. And so I would just ask that all the young people not to forget, and that if you do come into these areas, you have to recognize that as beautiful as some of these places are, come in a way that you're as if you're going to a respected elder or a respected mentor, or someplace like that.
Did you know that American Indians have participated with distinction in United States military actions for more than 200 years? In 1778, General George Washington noted that Indians were excellent as scouts and light troops. In 1917, when the United States entered into World War I, it is estimated that more than 12,000 American Indians served in the U.S. military. Ironically, American Indians were not made citizens until 1924. With the outbreak of World War II, a disproportionate number of Native Americans served in the military. Out of a population of less than 350,000, more than 44,000 American Indians served in the Pacific and European theaters of war. Today in the United States, there are over 190,000 Native American veterans. They play a key role in tribal ceremonies, and many tribal meetings begin with Native veterans carrying in the American flag as well as the flags of tribal nations.
The Office of Special Trustee for American Indians is a many-layered organization with specialists who work in areas such as risk management, investment management, and other services to meet the needs of its beneficiaries. On a previous edition of Native Report, we learned why the office was formed. On this edition, we'll see how the office enforces this trust responsibility.
The Office of Special Trustee for American Indians provides a wide range of services to beneficiaries. StrataWeb is one way the OST serves Indian people.
We have two sets of beneficiaries. We have the tribes, and there's approximately 250 tribes. We also have about a little over 380,000 individual Indians. And they have accounts for different reasons. It could be because they've received a per capita. They're underage, so they have not reached the age of majority, which normally is 18, to receive their funds. It could be that you have elders who are not able to take care of their funds, so these are supervised by the BIA social services group. And then they have land, and any of the income coming off of that land would be placed in trust. StrataWeb is a product that we utilize for the tribes. The tribes are able to go in and look at their account at any point in time. Any day they can look and see exactly what's in their account, what the funds are, where they were derived from. All of that is received right. They can just look at from their desk. We're moving toward being able to allow the individuals to be able to do that same type of research, to be able to look at this. A little more complicated because it involves a lot more passwords when you're talking 300,000 people.
Another service beneficiaries can access is the call center.
It opened December of 2004 to provide information on a toll-free line to beneficiaries who can call from anywhere, all across the country. The hours of operation are Monday through Friday from 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock Mountain Time, and then in the mornings on Saturday morning from 8 o'clock to noon. At any given time, 16 to 18 live individuals manning the call center. They've received over 685,000 calls since the inception of the Trust Beneficiary Call Center, or the TBCC. Most of those deal with financial inquiries, people wanting to know, have I received my check? Has the money from my grandmother's probate arrived in my account? When are we going to receive our oil and gas royalty payments? I think it's added great value to our responsibility as trustee. It's a service that people are now gaining more familiarity with, and are use it quite often.
Two important elements of the trust responsibility are internal controls and risk management. While they pertain to OST, they can also apply to individuals and tribes.
When you decide which mortgage company to go with, which school to enroll your children, which car to buy, you do risk assessments. You decide, based on the pros and the cons, what is the best for you? What's the best for your children? What we're really focusing on right now is automation, automation, automation. And that doesn't mean reduce people necessarily. What it really means to us, especially in Indian country, is there's so many jobs out there, there's so many tasks out there that people haven't had time to get to. If we can automate a lot of what we do, it's going to increase capacity out there, and it's going to give us the ability to do more to get out there and meet the fiduciary responsibility, meet the trust responsibilities of more of what we haven't been able to get to, like compliance, like wide area planning across the reservations. Automation is going to allow us to do that. For the first time, the trust funds have been on a real trust system. You know, we all sit around and go, phew. And in some ways it is personal, because our parents and our cousins and us, our children, are account holders or our landowners. When we go out and we do work on data quality integrity, people come back and go, guess what? I came across my great-great-grandfather's patent. It was just a moment. I mean, the stories we all tell each other, incredible moments.
Other outreach services offered by OST include tax form preparation, estate probate, trust fund investment, even financial skills training.
It depends on the audience that we're talking about. So if, for example, we were talking to high school students, we might talk about checking accounts, we might talk about car loans, what types of things to look for and not look for, talk about credit reports, we can talk about investments, you know, spending plans and saving, and what are your long-term, short-term goals? It's going to be different for a student who's just graduating from high school as opposed to somebody who's looking at, you know, maybe a couple of years from now retiring from the workforce. This is not your typical bureaucracy. It's not your typical counting the numbers or, you know, wanting to know how many widgets did you produce. We deal with people and we deal with their lives and their stories.
Trust Beneficiary Call Center, this is Garcia speaking. How can I help you?
We can sit here and sit in our investment reviews and be very technical and talk about the quantitative easement, the easing that's going on. You know, we can get very technical. And then you go out on the ground and you talk to these beneficiaries and you read about our trust officers telling us the things that they've accomplished and the people that we've been able to find or help or assist that have not been able to get information on their land. Being able to actually leave a legacy to say, these assets, this land, the monies, we have controls over these now. We're going to be leaving that legacy that says we've done something that has never been accomplished in Indian history.
We still speak the language. We still do our ceremonies, and I think in that area there's no price tag to that. So we're rich in that in our culture pride that we haven't forgotten yet. So it's sort of difficult as we approach the 21st century to be a Native American. The dominant society is in the fast lane, racing with time, and us Indians, we live from sun up to sundown. You know, maybe during the daytime, we go in and have a three-piece tailored suit and try to go to the corporate world. And then when the nighttime comes, we hang that suit up and then go into our native regalia and go down to the ceremonial chambers and practice our religion and our prayers and our songs and ceremonies. So that's the way the Picaricians live today.
Native leaders gathered at the Native Women's Caucus during the National Congress of American Indians Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Part of a larger forum, the caucus addressed several key issues significantly impacting Native communities: welfare, economic development, education, health, and public safety.
Attendance to the NCAI Women's Caucus varied throughout the morning and afternoon, But by day's end, several resolutions were prepared for presentation to the NCAI Executive Committee.
This is our third meeting of the caucus, and we had a report from the Domestic Violence Task Force of NCAI, and they talked about the issues that they were addressing. And within our discussions as the caucus, we identified 4 resolutions that could cause for action to be taken on what's occurring now in Indian country with domestic violence against women. So that's exciting because that's how we had hoped the caucus would work, is that the issue would be identified and that we would find solutions for addressing the issue. So the caucus, I think, is just a natural evolution of that time where women's issues aren't addressed specifically in any other committee within NCAI, and they are important issues and they need to be addressed, and the caucus is a way for us to specifically look at what's happening to women and children and set policy that's then taken to the national level for implementation.
One resolution dealt with the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights, another with the Tribal Law and Order Act, and one initiative that has the attention of First Lady Michelle Obama.
We're embarking on an initiative that's very important to the First Lady. It's called the Let's Move initiative, and what the First Lady's goal is to reduce or eliminate childhood obesity in a generation. And so we know that the numbers are going up in a lot of the communities throughout the country. In Indian country, it's particularly high. So we want to make sure that we have a very keen eye on how we can make sure that her initiative is addressing the obesity issue for children in Indian country. We're also meeting with the First Lady's office on a regular basis on how to make sure that this is a part of the bigger plans that are going out for Let's Move, working with the Domestic Policy Council and with the various agencies in how we can all work together and in a partnership with tribes on addressing this important issue.
Just as important is what individuals can do to make a difference in their home communities.
We are taking those and working towards legislation or towards, working with the president to find solutions with coordination with the different agencies under the government that would work with Indian country and cause for, some solutions to the problems that exist. And a lot of them had to do with the lack of coordination that occurs between the agencies and the tribes. So I'm looking forward to that out of this and the discussion that took place tonight is that there will be trainings that we identify in the process that will help for women to, support them in their leadership roles. When we go to conferences, you hear a lot of information and you go home and you don't have anything that you're taking to implement. So we're looking to actually provide for some tools so that as we discuss the issues that we can actually take something home to implement.
The caucus is one way of addressing change, whether it's personal or social.
What we're trying to do is formulate plans on how we can address this issue, but we can't do it by ourselves. And so what we're embarking on right now is ways that tribes are addressing the issue already and how we can either complement those or get the information out on their effective strategies to other nations that might want to also address the issue in their communities. And people are having success out there in addressing the issue. We want to shine a spotlight on it so that there's more attention to it. And we're also very interested in making sure that the tribes and the people, the policy folks that work on these issues in Indian country are folded into how we approach it.
At home, in our culture, the world's out of balance when you see all kinds of things that are going wrong in the country, whether it's a natural disaster or drugs on reservations or domestic violence. All that causes for your world's out of balance. And women are the life givers, are taking care of the family. We tend to want what's a better life for our children. We look for ways to create peace. We're negotiators. Women are seeing that things need to change, and we're wanting to play an active role in creating that change. That it's not okay for us to have the highest suicide rate. It's not okay for, you know, our children to be on drugs and not succeeding and dropping out of school. And so, because there isn't a change and things just continue to get worse, that women are stepping forward to create a change.
We would not behave the way we behave if we had strong.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org. Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Stacy Thunder. See you next time on Native Report.
Stacy Thunder is a member of and legal counsel for the Red Lake Nation, and Tad Johnson is a member of the Boys Fort Band of Chippewa and is chair for the American Indian Studies Department on the campus of the University of Minnesota Duluth.